So retard alert, 1,000 retards like this. And he says, in addition to praising fascists, Alexander Dugin, who started as an anti-communist, anti-Soviet dissident, okay, if you were opposed to Gorbachev's reforms, you were a dissident. You realize it was the actual Communist Party of the Soviet Union which dissolved the Soviet Union? I don't know. Maybe he doesn't know that. I mean, do you know what party Yeltsin came from? Norton? If you wanted to save the Soviet Union, you had to be against the party in some capacity. Obviously you did. You had to be against the status quo and the ruling bureaucracy. Of course you would have. They're the ones who fucking destroyed the Soviet Union. Anyway, he said that Dugin has called for the territorial disintegration, splintering, and political and administration partition of the Chinese state. Okay, I have a lot of material to show you with regard to that. The first thing I'm going to do is pull it up. It's going to be two ones. These are going to be like evidence from Chinese scholars, because Dugin's very well received in China. Here it is. Okay. So for context, Dugin did call for a strategy, or open up the possibility of a strategy of, the Eurasian geopolitics to involve a like splitting up of China and an encirclement of China, even making an alliance with Japan and India against China. Now, what was the context, though? Because Dugin is not a Marxist-Leninist, he did not appreciate the orientation that China was headed towards in the 1990s. And now, to be fair to Dugin, the intellectual atmosphere within China at the time was heavily dominated by pro-Western liberals. So he got the impression that because of China's reform and opening up, it is destined to become a tool of globalism, which would be used against Russia and against the anti-Western, anti-hegemonic Eurasian project. In other words, Dugin saw all of the great economic activity that was going on in China, and he falsely believed that it was more likely that China was going to go to the side of the West and Atlanticism. So that is the context. I'm reading it now, Foundations of Geopolitics, which Dugin takes out of context. And in Foundations of Geopolitics, Dugin also entertains the less likely possibility that China would align itself with the Eurasian forces, the anti-Western hegemonic forces. And he said in that event, China would be a great ally. But he said he doesn't think that's going to happen, so we should look at this strategy. Now, it's fair to say Dugin was not well informed about China. And that's fine because he wrote it in 1993. He was not a Marxist-Leninist who understood Chinese Marxism-Leninism. Something, by the way, he's going to admit, so we can forgive him for all of those things. But there's some crucial there's some crucial pieces of evidence that are going to make Ben look like a fucking idiot for saying what he just did. Okay? The first thing is going to come from Chinese sources themselves. I'm going to first give you what the Chinese scholar Yu Liang says about Dugin and Dugin's problematic history with relation to China. Because as you know, Dugin is being studied heavily in China. He's very popular in China. He goes to China pretty regularly. He's engaging with Chinese intellectuals. And he's being well received by Chinese academies and Chinese thinkers. And the Communist Party itself, events hosted by the Communist Party. So that's the state of China now, right? So first I'm going to say, what do the Chinese think of Dugin? Because we've got what Ben's pasty, Grendel-looking ass thinks of Dugin. What do the Chinese themselves think of Dugin and Dugin's, writings in the 1990s about the territorial disintegration of China? Well, here it is. I'm writing this article to express my grief for Dugin. But for friends who are really confused about Dugin's thought, I would like to make some explanations. Regarding his thoughts, I would like to explain that we should never expect him to think exactly the same as the Chinese, because we're different, yada, yada, yada. But he's been a fundamental supporter of China's reunification over the years, a supporter of China's resistance to U.S. imperialist oppression, abandoning his past Central Asia buffer zone split thinking, and firmly supporting China's Xinjiang governance and the Belt and Road Initiative vision. By the way, he not only had wrong ideas about the territory of Western China in the past, but also wished to unite Japan. He appreciates the elegant side of Japanese culture. And here's the important part, which Benny Boy decided to ignore. But after visiting China twice at our invitation, he has been attracted by Chinese culture and believes that Chinese culture is more dynamic and inclusive than Japan. We don't agree with all of his ideas, but this doesn't prevent serious people from seeking common ground. And as far as Daria, she was a tireless, enthusiastic girl who was always ready to fight. She's expressed her views in the Chinese media many times and worked hard to unite and fight for hegemony for Sino-Russian friendship. Her fighting spirit is immortal. That's what he said, an actual Chinese scholar living in China. Now let's hear what Dugin now has to say about China. Because Dugin's views on China have fundamentally shifted after he learned more about China. Now, Dugin's actually going to talk not only about China, but about Marxism. Because China's opened his eyes to Marxism in new ways. First of all, I think the ideological camp and world today is not very clear. I would like to evaluate the Communist Party from its historical achievements. Mao and Deng are both supporters of Marxism. From 7 years ago today, Marxism has played a very important role in the governance of the Chinese Communist Party. One of the great things about the Communist Party of China is that it has preserved China's sovereignty. Compared with the failed experience of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the Communist Party of China is very successful. In the reform, especially the economic and democratic reform, the party's made great achievements. Instead of bringing about the destruction of the country, it's made the country more and more prosperous. The Communist Party of China has continued to develop, standing still in the world, bringing well-being to the Chinese people. At the same time, its ideology are closely related to the Chinese historical tradition and the culture of the Chinese people. And it is the continuation of Chinese civilization which is advanced and pioneering in this respect. Today, the Chinese Communist Party, under the leadership of President Xi, is a truly progressive party and at the same time represents the independence of China, which the Soviet Union didn't accomplish. In fact, China has also gone through detours, but it can correct its own development path in time. So I want to bow before the wisdom and greatness of the Chinese Communist Party. They did not imitate our path and went to ruin, but became more and more prosperous and prosperous. He wants to bow before the greatness and wisdom of the Communist Party, which probably means he's probably open to Marxism in ways he wasn't before. Because whereas the Communist Party in the Soviet Union led the country to ruin, you have to understand the Russian mind and Russian perspective. I mean, imagine you're a Russian living in the 1990s amidst all of that devastation, amidst all of that turmoil, all that excess mortality. Of course you're going to, think Marxism failed and you're going to hate the Communist Party of the Soviet Union for leading to the destruction of its own people and allowing that to happen. But now Dugin appreciates that Chinese Marxism is still living. It's not like in the 1990s where he thought, China is just going on the path of liberalism. No, he understands now China's on its own sovereign, independent path. Now he bows before the greatness of wisdom of the Communist Party. So you see the problem. If this stupid fuck Ben Norton actually bothered to read anything, maybe in addition to being an anti-human piece of shit for tweeting that in response to a philosopher being butchered and murdered by literal Nazis, he would at least save himself from the embarrassment of being an illiterate fucking retard who doesn't even know the first thing of what he's talking about. At least some of these liberals are maliciously lying and know what they're doing as far as the evil. But Ben Norton's worse. He's both evil, human scum, but in addition to that, he's also a fucking idiot. And he's fucking illiterate about almost everything he talks about. So, multipolarista! There you have it.